A quick word from our sponsors, LiveShift. If you want to grab anything TCG related or anime related, check out the link down below. Use the code HEAL5 for 5% of your order and to support the channel. If you want to support us directly, you can check out our exclusive playmat, always in the description down below. And now back to the video. Welcome back to the channel. Our guest today is Enrico, and if you've been following the competitive scene, you definitely already know who he is. For those who might not, Enrico is the winner of the 2024 European Championship in Utrecht and more recently the regional champion of Bologna. But he didn't stop there. He also managed to top both in Lorcana and Gundam, earning, in my opinion, the title of King of Games.
Thanks.
Today we'll be talking about one of the big three deck of OP13, Ace. A deck that Enrico recently released a full guide on. I highly recommend checking it out. You'll find the link in the description down below. In this interview, we'll go through his card choices, discuss the main matchups like Imu, Zoro, and the Mirror, and finish off with some tips for players who are looking to pick up the deck. First of all, hi Enrico.
Hello, thanks for inviting me, as usual.
Looking at the lists, the first thing I noticed is the absence of 10-cost Taxbeard. What made you decide to go with the 9-cost one instead?
So I was playing the Taxbeard a lot before I saw the latest lists in Asia. And then I saw, I think it was Jelly Bean's performance in one of the recent Asian tournaments. And I saw that they completely cut off the Taxbeard, so I wanted to try without it. When I started to test the more in-depth matchups, and then I understood, like, also I played against a lot of good Imu players. I understood that it's quite easy to play around the Taxbeard. So I had to make a decision also because I understood that in order to let's say hold the Green Zoro matchup, I needed to make a decision. I have quite tight slots, so it's not easy to find a balance to play all the new gates. And with the 9-cost new gate, you can easily achieve the same that you do with the Taxbeard most of the times by blocking a single turn of swings, sometimes even better. Because what I noticed also by playing Imu is that sometimes you could sacrifice 2 cards from your hand to swing still. So the Taxbeard was not really blocking all the attacks and the leader could still swing. While becoming an 8k sometimes can block most of the attacks, or like becoming a 10k with a combo in Whitebeard plus the 9-cost new gate was even better. So that's why I wanted to play that card. I think it's quite mandatory now because it's slightly better than the Taxbeard and also more difficult to play around from a perspective of an opponent in general. That can be an Imu or like any other deck. And it's really good against Green Zoro. Green Zoro is also one of the most difficult matchups, so of course you need some supports for that. But in general, I think Taxbeard is not terrible. It's just the most really good players that now know how to play around it. So that's why I wanted to cut it out. I still think the card is playable. It's just the slots of the deck are too tight, and I couldn't find the spot. Because the problem with Taxbeard is that you need to play back-to-back Taxbeards, otherwise you won't achieve what you actually want. Because even if you block for 1 turn the board of your opponent, then they won't even sacrifice it, and you cannot really push much because your leader will be 6k anyways. While with the 9-cost Whitebeard, at least you can push 8k, so call for at least a blocker from your opponent. And most of the times you can also swing 9 and still assign it on to your leader, so it's good that you can also assign it on, while with Taxbeard you cannot assign it on. Your attack is going to be just 6k. And if you don't play another Taxbeard the next turn, then it's pointless to have it on the board. Also the 9-cost Whitebeard can really block attacks from other decks. Sometimes it can really deny a whole board. For example, especially if you play against Green Zoro, it's really good. Also in the mirror match, I find the Taxbeard not as good as the 9-cost. A lot of times you want to attack for 8 and still develop a big body, so it's slightly better. But in general, I would say is at least when you get into really detailed understanding of the matchups, you will see that the 9-cost Whitebeard is slightly better than the 10-cost, and also is a card that standalone is much better. While the Taxbeard, you will need to play several copies, and I only had really 2 slots, so I was like, okay, I would play the 9-cost. but I think it's better in any case for this meta.
I also see you are running the 6-cost Rush Yamato, a card that mostly disappeared from recent Asian lists. What's your take on it, and why do you think it still deserves a spot?
So this card is also mentioned in the guide. Is like the first card that if you wanted to, decide to play like other tech cards that I don't play, will be the first one to go away. My personal choice to play this is because I believe the meta that we're gonna have in Europe, at least, is gonna be much more focused on emu compared to maybe the Asian meta. That's what I noticed from social media, from content that is being released. Also the buys, like people is buying a lot of emu cards. So I think emu will be the most popular deck, and I think this card can really shine in that matchup. It's also a tool. I wanted to include at least one rush in my deck list. Sometimes it can really pay off by playing the emu matchup, but also other matchups. Sometimes you might need a rush character. I don't think this card is mandatory at all. I just like it in my deck list. I think it's 2 flex spots that could change for anything else. There are several cards that you can actually play, but I like it in general, especially when you go first, because I think when you go first, especially against emu, it's very difficult. But if you see this card on curve for 7 down, then it's really good, and it can open up some really good plays. And can punish if they break, for example, in the early game. With emu can happen a lot that they don't have enough counters to counter out in the early game. And then if you can put them, especially in the first 3 turns at 2 life, then it's going to be much easier. I don't think the card is mandatory at all. It's my personal choice. I will also explain in the guide why I went with it. For now, as the meta, from what I expect from the meta, I think it's a good card to include. Then we will see if maybe in a month we will see a much higher amount of Ace or like Roger or like Snake Man or like Green Zoro, then maybe the card could go away. But for now, if I expect a lot of emu, so I would like to include at least one card that really focused on that matchup.
Perfect. Now let's talk about the first matchup, the emu matchup. People often say it's a dice roll, that whoever goes second usually wins. Do you think that's true, or it's a bit overstated? And what are the key cards in this matchup that really make the difference?
It's indeed correct that going second is a big advantage. Just because both decks, they want to play on curve when going second for both the key cards of the matchup. Of course, Ace want to play I'm Whitebeard for 8, while emu wants to play the Gorosei for 10. So it's really focused on that, the matchup, and how fast can actually emu can actually drop the first 5 elders. So that's the whole thing about the matchup, like how fast can you be with Ace before they drop the first 10 cost. That is the main thing. From my perspective, I think, at least from my testing in the last 2 months, I saw that when emu goes first, it's really difficult to win if Ace sees a good curve. While for Ace is likely better, because if he goes first, he can still do things, and emu can still miss some pieces. So for example, if you go first as Ace and they don't drop the Mars for 6 ton, something that can happen, then you are again favored, because then they don't get rid of the aggro that you can actually put on them. Also there, the difference is that emu cannot really build towards Ace or like build towards the fact that they will lose a die roll, while Ace can actually fix that by playing cards that we will say, okay, this card might be good when I go first. So that's also like, I like the fact that Ace can be built while emu is like fixed. Like you have like your 50 cards, maybe you can change around like 2 or 3 cards, but they're always like either counters or like blockers. So not really cards that can fix the curve. And the deck is like fixed on like you have to play Saturn into Mars, into like whatever. It's really fixed. While with Ace you have several options, and you can find different solutions. I still think the dice can change a lot the matchup. If you go second, you are favored, of course, but both decks, they really need to see something on curve to, let's say, capitalize on that advantage. And Ace has slightly more comebacks than emu, and emu gets more punished if they break early on, even if they go second. So I think it's, I would say it's a 50-50 matchup still. But yeah, the die roll indeed can change a little bit, but I wouldn't say like if you lose the die roll, you lose the game. You can still play, but it's gonna be very difficult. It also depends on how precise the two players are gonna be on the plays. But they have to really have clear in mind what is important in that matchup and like to capitalize on that. That's also what I explained on the guy. Like in that matchup, of course, the die roll is important, but there is a plan also when you go first. While with him also there is a plan, but it's more fixed, and you need to see the right cards at the right moment. If you miss even one of them, it's going to be very difficult. But yeah, I would say indeed the die roll is important, but it's not like I lose the die roll, I lose the game. It's an overstatement, I would say.
Moving on to the Zoro matchup, as you said, it used to be considered one of the worst matchup for the deck. Do you still think that's the case, or was it really never that bad to begin with?
So Zoro is indeed a tough matchup for Ace, but the more I test Emu as well, the more I understand that also for Emu is not free. The die roll is quite important for both decks. In this meta, the die roll is really important indeed. But by testing a lot in that matchup, I found new lines to go with Ace. That helped me out in that matchup. So it's kind of like, because the problem with that matchup is that it's kind of tricky to understand what to do when you come out of nowhere. It's also counterintuitive to do the right plays. A lot of times you will need to take damage, because normally when you sit down with Ace against Green Zoro, you say, okay, I need to block all the damage as much as possible, because then of course I need to be healthy when I drop my 10 cost. But actually, it really depends on other things. For example, it's important to understand that you really need to stick at least one piece on board. So, for example, what I also outline in the guide is that you really need to save the first piece you develop with Ace. And it's important to save it, because then you will have some kind of pressure on your opponent as well. Because if you don't put pressure on them, then you won't have enough time to finish them off. So it is important to kind of try and put like an inversion of race for the damage against Green Zoro. And that's why I always say the first character. Of course, if they go like infinite attack on the 6k, then I just let it go. But if they go like 8 on 6, I usually save it. And the trick in that matchup is to understand whether you want to save a piece or you want to save a life. So that's really important, and it's really situational. So it really depends on that. And also like cards like Josu that were not playing. I remember the Josu was not played at all in the beginning of the meta, and now it's like mandatory for off. It's really important in this matchup, because you kind of like remove some pressure from the board, and you put pressure yourself. So I think the matchup is indeed difficult, but it's super winnable. If you go first, it's slightly better. If you go second, it's a bit more difficult, but I would say like it's not like 100-0 like most people think. I think if you don't know the matchup, it's really 100-0, because if you don't do the things that are kind of counterintuitive when you first play the deck, you will lose 100%. But if you know which pieces to say, when to take damage, all these things, for sure it will become already much better, and you will see that every game, even if you lose, it will be very close. So actually a matchup that it's supposed to be like impossible, it's almost kind of even. I wouldn't say even, because it's a bad matchup for sure. But yeah, indeed, it's a matchup you can play, and I think it's still the most difficult for Ace, but it's super winnable. And we can see it also in big tournaments. I'm seeing like a lot of Asians pro players playing Ace, beating Green Zoros, losing the Darrell, still winning. So it means that the pattern is working, and yeah, there is a way to win the matchup.
And then for the last matchup, let's talk about the mirror. What do you usually try to keep in your hand, and which specific spot or play tend you give you the edge for the win?
So the mirror match is quite tricky, because it really depends on the die roll, and you have to adopt a different game plan when you go first or second. So when you go second, it's quite standard. You just want to do your usual curve. So for the mulligan, it's usually like the best thing with Ace is like, of course, having like Izo and Garb. They're the best start. They can find almost all the pieces of the combo you need. Otama is not terrible. The most important thing in a mirror match in the early turns is to develop small bodies like Izo, Garb, and Otama, because you will enter into like a war of Josus at some point. And if you have enough pieces on board that you can just bounce back, it will be easier for you to manage the board. So when you go second, you just do like Marco into Josu or like Yamato, depending on the board, into like I am Whitebeard, play the first big guy, and so on, so on. Depending on the board, like you can do multiple 10 calls or like play Red Rock based on that. In my list, for example, I just play one Red Rock. As I said before, I expect a lot of emus and not a lot of mirror match. So that's why. But like, for example, if you expect a lot of mirror match, a lot of Roger, then Red Rock is indeed a card you want to play at least 2 copies of. It's of course one of the best cards in a mirror match, because if you develop a 12k and then they develop their 12k and then you just Red Rock, you can swing for a 12. That is really good. In the early turns, if you go first, you usually, so like the person going second is the one leading the game, so they just develop bodies and push, while the person going first is the one that has to usually answer the plays. So like they play, for example, that's why I play Atmos. It's really good when you go first, because if they play Marco on curve, then you can just Atmos, and then they can just play something else, and then you can just Josu. So you gain that kind of ball control back, and with those pieces you can push, and it's annoying for them because then they need to go on the pieces, and then they will just delay the pressure they have on you, and then you always have a piece to assign the dons with the block gates, and then it's like always usually if you get the lead with going first, then you can kind of get that edge back. Of course, going second is better because you need to see less cards. So when I go second, I mulligan for Iso, Garp, Marco, Josu. 5 cost Yamato is fine. 6 cost Yamato is not that great in a mirror match, but it's still decent. But Josu is like one of the key cards. When you go first, you need the Searchers, of course, and then you need Atmos for 5 is really good. Or you just answer back with a Marco, and then you just want Josu. Josu is really important when you go first. But like you have Iso to search it, Garp to search it, you draw a lot. You can just play Otama to just cycle off your hand. You have so many ways to find it. I never struggled finding it, to be honest. I play 4 copies. I have like 8 Searchers, plus 4 cards that draw 2, plus like my leader effect, plus my Marcos, plus my Yamatos. Like I have many ways to see it, so it's really good. But in general, the mirror match depends a lot on how your opponent is playing it. If they play Josu back on your Josu, then you can just play Josu back. And at some point, someone will change, and instead of answering the Josu with a Josu, they will just play a 10 cost. In that spot, it depends. If you have a 10 cost yourself or a red drop, that's usually the answer, and then you go from there. You also need to be careful with life, because of course, when one of the two is going to drop to 0, Roger is going to be a threat. If you're really ahead, you can also afford to just play Roger on curve. It's quite dangerous because if they red drop that Roger, then it's kind of problematic. But usually if you use Roger to either trade something, like a lot of times I like people playing the Josu on my Josu, and then I swung with the Josu, and then I just played Roger to trade the Josu, and then there I kind of stabilized. But it really depends. If they have, for example, a blocker on board, it's difficult to Roger, so it's not easy to play in a mirror match. But usually it's like, and that's the point of the whole deck, is like to understand how much time is left before anyone is going to 0, and we just Roger. Because once they Roger, all your Blockbeard are going to be useless, all your Utas are going to be useless, Marcos are going to be useless. So you need to be careful with that and kind of manage hand size and the board and the life. And also the problem of the mirror match is that pudding is a card, and a lot of times you won't be able to play around it. So like you will have a lot of games where the line that I usually go with is like, we play the Josu War, and then what I do is like I play Josu, bounce back is Josu, and then I put in for 10 down. So in that way I put them at 5, and also there you have a chance that your opponent won't draw like any answer, and they have to go with a really bad turn on the next turn. And even if they draw, for example, a 10 cost and they play it, because then you maximize the chances of not letting them play pudding back, then you just gain a huge card advantage. And if they go with a 10 drop, you can just red rock if you have it, and then you usually win the game, because then they have very few cards. That turn you can push, you can go like double 8, or like it depends on your hands, but in that spot usually you win. So like key cards, I will say the bounce guys, the searchers, pudding, red rock, these cards are the best. Of course, in the mulligan, you just want to find the searchers and like the first guys you want to play, because then you will have time to find the pudding, you will have time to find the red rock. You can search both with Garp, so that's good as well. And you will draw off Marcos, Yamatos, and whatever, so you will see them anyways.
And now for the final question. Any tips or advice for players who are just starting to pick up the deck?
Tips in general for the deck, I would say the focus on the deck is to understand hand management. So, for example, you want to maximize the generation of resources. So, for example, you need to assign a Dawn to your leader whenever you can, because then you have the option to draw an extra card, and that is going to generate a lot of cards that you will need in the late game to win. The most important thing with the deck is to understand whether you want to take a damage, whether you want to let a piece die, always to use leader effects, always prioritize assigning the Dawn if you can. You need to know the threats of your opponent, which pieces you need to develop, which ones he can kill. So for example, if they play cards like Mars, if they play Josus, if they play Shigi to rest something and kill it. There are several ways in the meta to kill the small guys. The big guys, they cannot really kill. There is not really a deck that can kill those except in a mirror match with Red Rock. So those are usually safe to play. But the biggest skill in the mirror, deck in general, is to understand how much time is left in the game and try to drag the game for long enough by developing 9-cost Whitebeard, 10-cost Whitebeard, and so on, to then have enough pieces to say, okay, I just drop the Roger and win the game. So that's the most important skill to develop. I would recommend practicing like life management, hand control, balancing between like board control and like how to go face, how to take damage. Try to manage the life from both yourself and your opponent so you understand when it's better to drop the Roger. Try to maximize the leader effect. Try to always push as well. I see a lot of people, they play too defensively and they give their opponent too much time to like stabilize. Sometimes they just swing with blockers, like the marker I used to swing, for example. Because I know like they're gonna trade it, it's gonna die, I will draw 2 cards plus leader effect 3 cards, I don't care. Like if he swung once, I just played it, swung for 7 or 6, just dies, I draw 3 cards, it's like really good. So it's always like put pressure on your opponents, try to use leader effect every turn, try to clean your hand with the other leader effects. So like if you have a lot of bricks, use the -2. Try to delay the -2 as much as possible during a turn. If you know, okay, it will go with a bunch of 7s or like 7/8s, just use the -2 as late as possible. Try to understand which cards you can afford to discard, which ones you have to keep. For example, the Roger, okay, the whole game is going to be trash, but you only play 2, for example, so you need to understand, I need this card in my hand, I don't want to have a brick. How many do I play? Did I see one of them already? Like, can I discard these or not? Which cards can I discard? Like, it's really important, all these aspects together, they come together. I think Ace is a really good deck to build the strong fundamentals of like hand management, life management. Ball control is quite easy because you usually play 1 piece per turn. So you don't really need to like think about board control. Most of the most matchups you won't need to play board control because you just go face. Except for the mirror match, of course. In mirror match, board control is everything, so that's really important. I think against Roger as well, board control is quite important. Against Zoro, like you're kind of forced to board control because you need to remove the threats. But other than that, like sometimes you cannot even do that. So it's more like building on the race of damage, how much time is left. That's one of the most important things for this deck, but also in One Piece. And the biggest advice, I don't know, do coaching, buy a guide, ask around, play with your friends. You have several ways to learn the deck. I think it's a really good deck to learn. I think both Emo and this deck are the most complex of the meta. Ace, you have more creativity to go with the build, so I like it a bit more. But it's indeed not as easy as most people think.
And that's gonna be it for today's interview. Huge thanks to Enrico for taking the time to share his thoughts and insight with us. It's always a pleasure to have you on the channel.
Same for me.
If you want to dive even deeper into Ace, make sure to check out the Enrico full guide. You'll find the link down in the description. Thanks for watching. As always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and bye!